Hopefully, I'm sure we've got some questions. So who wants to take the first question? Put your hand up. There you go.
Hi, how you doing? Nick Rubens from Zero Waste Scotland. Over the past couple of days, we've heard a lot of examples of circular cities, and a lot of them have been relating to Amsterdam or the Netherlands. What else is happening around the world in terms of government showing appetite for this and sort of understanding that it's important?
Who wants to take that? Do you want
I'll take it. Yeah. So just to understand, was that around what is the UK government doing? Is that what your question was about, or?
Yeah, what's the UK government doing, but what other examples are there around the world of this happening?
Right. Okay. Well, I guess from our point of view, we typically look to the Netherlands. They seem to be the front runners in a lot of work around circular economy. But in our research, in terms of actually putting hard policy in play, the UK or London at the moment is leading in this. So what we found in our research was that there was a lot of support in existing planning documents for circular economy approaches being taken, and that government support is available. But from what we saw, there's no sort of requirement for delivering circular economy in either the planning in the planning space or even in non-planning policy. So we're sort of leading and pioneering, I think, in that learning and pioneering in that space. But I'm sure Alex might have other views on that too. But I think for us, we look mainly to Amsterdam as a city. And also Paris in terms of what they're looking to put into their policies and documents, where they see the opportunities for circularity. But yeah, it's an exciting but also quite a nervous time, because it's a new concept and it isn't. I think you're trying to pull together a whole lot of themes and concepts around energy, about land use, around social mobility, and trying to get into one aspect, one themed conversation. That is a bit of a challenge, but we are encouraged that government are now looking at it more seriously here in the UK. That was echoed through their resources and waste strategy, which they published about 3 weeks ago, and they've got new consultations coming out on things like strengthen extended producer responsibility, on deposit return schemes. They're trying to get industry and manufacturers to design products that can be reused over and over again, to support more industry like more manufacturing that supports circular economy approaches. So it is starting to happen a lot more, but I'm sure my other colleagues will have an opinion for what other countries are doing.
I'll just do a quick one actually, because we have, as part of the BAM project, we've done a review of policies and regulations globally, and there are a couple of quite interesting examples from places like Seattle, Vancouver and Japan, where they've tried to improve the longevity of buildings and make like pre-demolition audits and selective demolition more attractive. And I think, Teresa, you want to...
Hi, yeah, I think there's countries like, I think you will see several examples in Europe and different member states doing slightly different things, but all working in the direction of circular economy. For example, Belgium might be quite interested in doing quite a lot of things, quite innovative, maybe at a smaller scale than the Netherlands, but also quite innovative. Or if you look at the Nordic countries like Sweden or Denmark, they have been traditionally quite well positioned, and they are leading on some of the maybe they don't call it circular economy necessarily, but industrial symbiosis type of things, which they have been doing for a long time. So I think they are quite well positioned in this area. I think if we look around the world, I think China is definitely a country that is providing lots of really, really interesting initiatives, and they call it pilot projects, but a pilot project in China is like, 4 cities in Europe together. And I think they are doing quite innovative things with quite a lot of top-down approach, as you will expect, but I think they're definitely interested in terms of policies, but in terms of other initiatives that they are doing, and also combining different activities within the city, manufacturing, combined with residential and other functions.
Yeah. Just to add to this, I would underline actually Belgium and Brussels in sense of an extremely interesting case to look at. I would also say looking at Poland is actually interesting, because they are kind of course, rather behind in the traditional waste management, but there is in specifically old industrial cities and so on the idea or the ambition to make this one leap, yeah, and not repeat our mistakes a lot. And then I think at the moment it's in nearly every city is writing a circular economy plan, and I think there is very much attention and a bit of skepticism important. And I think what is really lacking, and what I haven't seen, is actually a really systemic understanding of plans and policies yeah, all around. It's very often focused on certain materials, on buildings, but the city is more than buildings. Yeah, it's so I think there is still a bit to go.
This lady at the front. Sorry, this lady at the front.
Thank you. A number of you are working in or with universities right now, but rather than looking at your own particular courses, I'm interested to know whether you have any influence with other courses like quantity surveying or town and country planning. You mentioned planning, for example, but what impact can you have in these other courses across the UK?
Who wants to take that?
I think from UCL side, I'm from University College London, and we created with my colleague Julia Stegeman a few years ago CIRCLE, the UCL Circular Economy Lab, and the idea has been trying to embed circularity across all the different disciplines in UCL, and I think UCL is an amazing place to do it, because we have from chemistry to town planning to geography, engineering. So I think we have been trying to gather efforts from different disciplines to actually meet together and trying to embed circularity in all the curriculum across the university, not only for postgraduate courses but also at the undergraduate level. And I think it's making, I think we are seeing some results. I think we see an increasing number of students actually being interested in issues related with circular economy, increasing number of dissertations being written about circular economy, and those graduates are then going to work in companies that are actually working in this space. So I think we are seeing some impact clearly.
Yeah, well, I cannot talk for the UK case, of course, but what helped us the circular economy concept was actually to have more interdisciplinary and even transdisciplinary courses. Yeah, so we introduced courses where we bring urbanism, architects, industrial design, and industrial ecologist students together and develop things together, and that makes us. And we're having also 2 MOOCs or 3 MOOCs. One is just in the building that deal with circular economy. In this sense, it's open to the world in this way.
And maybe just to add to, I mean, we collaborate quite closely with TU Delft, and I think we have the Ellen MacArthur Foundation set up a university pioneering network, and I think has been fostering quite a lot of collaboration across universities, which is really important.
Thank you. So we're very active with the universities in London, particularly UCL and Imperial. So we have projects going on there, particularly either in the built environment or, as Teresa said, around having sort of hackathons and workshops around what can be done sort of in the built environment, but also how can we thread circular economy thinking into the curriculum that's taught through the university curriculum. But also we have the Mayor's Entrepreneur program, which is about teaming up with young students trying to get their new ideas to market around, it started off around trying to develop low carbon products and services, but that's since been expanded to sort of deliver on circular economy ambitions as well. And every year we get increasing number of applications. We just had the last round close. Over 500 applications were received, which is really positive. We have a sponsor with cities that provide money for new young entrepreneurs to get their products to market, and every year every winner is somehow, I think, got a circular economy product or service. So the last winner was actually a company that was using disposable or flushable wet wipes as a product, so you wouldn't have to have some disposable products going to landfill, etc. So I think that's a really good platform to try and get new products to market using the university linkages.
Great. So do we have any last questions? Right, the last question. Thank you.
So I was just wondering, there are a lot of good, Sankey diagrams, etc., looking at the different flows of materials. Has any of your work looked at kind of multiplying each of those flows by the energy requirements and carbon footprint of dealing with them?
I'm the wrong person to hand this to because I don't know the answer, but I think it's a very relevant question, and I think it's one that, for me, is probably the center of all this, is what is the actual, as I said, what is the actual environmental impact of all these things? Because, it's all very well doing good things with circular flows, but if it's not giving a positive environmental impact, then we're making a mistake.
I think that's a really interesting question, and I think when we look at Sankey diagrams, we are caring mostly about the scale of the issues rather than where are the more critical impacts. And I think also we have seen that the kind of public debate and the debate in the industry is very skewed towards greenhouse gases. And then when we look at things and the impact of things, for example, in my work I combine my material flow analysis with life cycle assessment, so we try to understand what are the impacts of the different types of materials. But actually you see that there's many trade-offs between different materials. So some of the things might be really good to reduce global warming potential, so they might be good to reduce carbon or carbon emissions, but actually they might increase other impact categories, for example, toxicity. And we see this, for example, in the move to green mobility, which has been one of the key components of the transition to circular cities, which is about green mobility. Green mobility is great, but actually there are problems or challenges attached to green mobility. What happens with the battery? The battery, we have very toxic chemical binders. We are using very scarce critical raw materials, and we actually don't have the system to recover them at the moment. So actually moving away from thinking just about carbon emissions, which is really important because of climate change, but actually there are other things that are also really important, and we need to have kind of more holistic visions of what are the impacts across different categories, and we can actually go from what Michael Branger was saying, less bad things to actually good things. So can we move away from really bad things and do something that is actually good across different impact categories?
Just one sentence to add. I think the completely support everything what Teresa said, and I didn't talk about it, but we were developing with it also a life cycle assessment system behind it, and we are trying to add also social aspects to it. Because very often the life cycle is very on a global scale, but it's also about how does it influence the people in the neighborhood next to it, how does burden shifting take place, and so on. So I think this multi-scale and multi-scalarity in this assessment is super, super crucial.
Final say?
Thank you. Yeah, just to add, I think it's a very, very good question. I think we're very aware of it in developing the circular economy statement guidance for new developers. It depends on what goal you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to boost recycling rates? That doesn't always pair up nicely with trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And also things like good air quality, and also social inclusion, social value factors. So what we've the way we're trying to appease that is through the guidance. Is when you go through the product, which we'll release about this time next year, you get taken down a decision tree, if you like, in terms of what is it the goals you're trying to achieve. And if you're I think a good example is whether you use reinforced cement as opposed to steel joist, for example. And so it depends on the longevity of the building, what you have in mind. So it will generally take you down the path of what delivers the most practical environmental benefits, what is deliverable now, and the cost benefits of that as well. So it is very much factored into the equation to determine what route should you go down for developing a circular building.
Well, thank you everybody for staying until the bitter end and for your great questions. And obviously, thank you to our speakers and panelists. So give them a round of applause, please.